Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett, they release earnings
See
on
what
Saturdays.
happens when you try to talk with goldfish in your mouth?
Goldfish.
I am a sucker for the goldfish upstairs.
It's my
I have
first
to
breaks
say.
at 6:40 a.m. So
I
gotta
love
get
the
a
goldfish.
let's get out the
I'll probably end up getting a whole batch after we're done here.
Exactly. All right, so Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway reporting some earnings over the weekend. The question I always have is how much cash do they have on their balance sheet?
Everybody always wants to watch that as a contrarian potential indicator for the stock.
I just don't know what's going on over there. But our next guest does. Matt Palazzola, he's a senior analyst covering the insurance business for Bloomberg Intelligence, joining us here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. Matt, what'd you take away from the Berkshire's results on Saturday?
So, Paul, to answer your first question, $325 billion in cash. That's the most they've ever had. So when you look at their earnings, there's a couple of layers you have to unpeel first. Their GAAP earnings were swayed by investment changes. Buffett himself has said you kind of just throw that out. We don't really look at that. It was like 26, I think, billion versus an 11 billion loss in the year ago. Those numbers are a little bit irrelevant. The next part is their earnings from operating companies. Those, if you look at just the number they give you, those were down about 6%. What happened there, though, was they have a lot of yen debt, and there was a big Forex loss in there. So peel that back, the operating company's earnings were up a little bit, which was less than I expected. The insurance operation had a couple of unforeseen negatives in it, and that really turned it down. Some of them I don't think are ongoing things, but that was really the negative variance was in the insurance business.
Something, because we were actually chatting about this earlier when it came to the percent of their cash pile at Berkshire Hathaway. So the last time it was around this high, the stock market still continued to move on to records over the following 52 weeks. But then the last time on this opposite end of that, the lowest percent of cash he had at any time over the past decade was right when the S&P 500 briefly peaked in 2021. So what's your thoughts whenever you're kind of thinking about what this could mean more broadly for where like major indexes and equities could potentially be headed?
Yeah. So, I mean, Buffett is a more of a time in than timing of the market, right? Clearly. So, I don't think he's making big moves on large expectations on the market. If you look what happened, they sold about $22 billion worth of Apple stock in the quarter. That's along with about $9.5 billion worth of Bank of America stock in the quarter. I don't think you look at that and say, okay, he's completely bearish on everything on the market. I think those were, unique things. They were highly concentrated in Apple. Their Apple position is down 70% from its high. In terms of the shares they own. So I think those things were unique to the stocks they own. Buffett has repeatedly talked about taxes going up. I don't think it's even an election cycle now, but he's just saying even longer term, there's probably only one direction taxes are going for us, and that's up. So you'd not be surprised to see them taking large gains off the board.
So $325 billion, is there any realistic scenario for deploying that capital over a multi-year period?
It's tough. They are limited in how much shares they can buy back just on the float. We had wrote, it's tough to see them doing a tens of billion-dollar acquisition. There is the ownership in Chubb out there, which is, perhaps the mega deal that may or may not ever happen. If they do something, they bought Allegheny, which was an insurance company kind of conglomerate a couple of years ago. That was about $12 billion. It seems like that's going to be the max on what they're going to do. But if I could predict what Buffett would do, I'd be on an island somewhere. So,
but no dividend.
There will not be a dividend as long as Warren Buffett is sitting in Omaha.
Why is that?
I mean, I think he likes getting them. He doesn't like paying them. He says, look, and I would agree with him. I'm better off holding this money than giving it. Your return on a dividend is going to be less than my return investing it. That probably hasn't been true actually recently, but I think that's his mindset.
You were mentioning about how claims they wrote years ago are costing them more than expected. Walk us through that dynamic.
Sure. So this is called reserve development. So what happens is insurance companies, like, so for example, Geico, they write auto, some home, well, not really home, but write auto. You're either going to have a car accident in a year or you're not. But they'll write some liability business where you may have a claim, and that you might find out about that claim years into the future. And what is happening is you set up a reserve for that, and that reserve could be wrong, or they're almost always wrong, right? But it could be wrong too low or wrong too high. And what had happened in the quarter was their reserve for their primary insurance business, a specific unit of it, was quite wrong. And there's new management took over that unit, and usually when that happens, they add to their reserves. If this was just a XYZ insurance company, this would be really bad. But it's Berkshire. Their financial strength is so superior to anything you might see that it's kind of just a blip.
I got a Vespa scooter. Progressive wrote the policy on my Vespa
What
scooter.
were they thinking?
Wow, I wasn't ready for
Always
that
wear
one.
a helmet. That's all I can say.
I do have the helmet. Progressive, give me 30 seconds on Progressive, because so far I'm happy with.
Yeah, I mean, so Berkshire themselves has kind of been saying Progressive's ate our lunch for the past decade. Progressive, extremely innovative in pricing, which allowed them to kind of take a lot of market share. State Farm is kind of the big name there in auto insurance, and Allstate's just been picking away. I mean, not Allstate, Progressive has been picking away at them. The recent spike in auto insurance prices, they navigated that a lot better than the rest of the industry, which is allowing them to pull more share. Geico is shrinking, Progressive's growing. Really best operator in the auto insurance space, Progressive.
And actually,
good choice.
My existing insurer, which I've got like 5,000 lines with, their pricing was twice where Progressive was. So I'm just like, see ya. I'm going
They don't know how good of a risk you are.
Exactly right. Me, the Vespa scooters, cruising the Jersey Shore, John Tucker. What do you? That's a view. This is Bloomberg.
Did you see him come?